You won't believe the conflagration that just broke out in Season 13 of Love and Hip Hop Atlanta. And it all began when Scrappy and Spice decided they had had enough of rumors and made the decision to Mendeecees was cornered directly in front of everyone. Fans instantly felt that something was going to blow up, and the suspense was so intense that you could feel it through the TV. Rumors that Yandy and Mendeecees may not be as picture-perfect as they previously seemed have been circulating for weeks. However, none anticipated that things would become so unvarnished, straightforward, and this explosive. Imagine having friends over at a table and the conversation suddenly becomes pointed. Everybody's gaze is fixed on you as the grins fade. That's precisely what took place. Spice asked directly about the status of his marriage as she pushed closer, her voice breaking over the din. Scrappy immediately jumped in, intensifying the problem and preventing Mendeecees from avoiding the obvious. Home viewers were in disbelief, with some even referring to it as the season's most stunning confrontation to date. What followed wasn't your typical reality TV conversation. It was an agonizing experience that left everyone as curious as to whether one of the longest-running couples on the program is actually about to break up. The room felt thick with air. The instant Spice locked, she fixed Mendeecees with that piercing stare that only she could provide. Scrappy leaned back in his chair and waited for them, but there was no music, no jokes, no distractions, just pure energy emanating between them. The ideal opportunity to apply his own pressure. Mendeecees attempted to maintain his composure by changing his jacket and displaying his signature calmness, but it was clear that even he was unable to ignore the weight of the inquiries he was receiving. Spice had endured too much patience as she watched Yandy flaunt her flawless appearance as rumors continued to circulate that her marriage was beginning to falter. Thus, she seized the opportunity and asked directly what everyone had been eager to know. How are things actually going for you and Yandy? The DCs then sighed softly as if a storm were about to break forth. At first, he talked softly, as if he believed no one would actually hear him. He acknowledged that things had been challenging, and that he wasn't even sure how to characterize their current situation. Such a nebulous statement simply served to raise eyebrows and made the silence. It feels more louder around him. Slowly shaking his head, Scrappy leaned forward and spoke with more bite. You've been suppressing it for years, bro. Everyone is aware of that. However, it doesn't appear like you are certain of nothing at the moment. What's the real deal then? Fans who are viewing this, they couldn't believe what they were hearing. Within minutes, social media was ablaze with people expressing their disbelief and labeling it the most awkward moment of the season thus far. A few or others accused Mendes of concealing something, arguing that his reluctance spoke more than his words and that he deserved privacy. Presently, the man who had had a reputation for being dependable and devoted, but all of a sudden it seemed as though he had a secret too big to share. Spice wasn't going to accept him giving him only partial answers. She leaned in closer, her now in a stronger tone. She reminded him that Yandy had created her own kingdom, engaged in combat in front of cameras, and exuded an air of invincibility. However, if she's that powerful and why does it seem like you don't even know where you're at right there by her side? Spice pressed. The question went deep, and Mendeecees' expression changed. Uncomfortably in his chair, as if he had been torn between exposing a terrible truth and preserving his dignity. Carly, who never misses an opportunity to stir things up, then arrived. Throwing her, she grinned and swirled her drink before asking in that cunning tone, "So, are you together or not?" The whole table stopped for a moment, the words like gasoline upon an already igniting blaze. Every set of eyes was focused on Mendes, waiting for him to confirm or refute the murmurs, as the stillness echoed like a drumbeat. His jaw clenched as though he wanted to say something, and his face hardened. Anything but was unable to force himself to speak. Rather, he whispered that it had been 20 years, that family was family anyway, and that sometimes the connection didn't require informative, but the absence of a clear response simply increased mistrust. Scrappy and Spice looked at each other. They both agreed in silence that something wasn't quite right. Outside of the show, viewers made wild guesses about what may actually be happening. Some said they saw Yandy posting mysterious messages about patience and loyalty on the internet. Others asserted that during recent appearances, Mendeecees had been seen without his wedding band. Whether it was true or not, the commotion merely intensified, creating the impression that a significant discovery was imminent. Corner. The vibe in the gathering continued to change. Friends who used to laugh together with ease suddenly looked at each other with suspicion. I'm not sure if pushing harder would cause everything to fall apart. The sharpness was still there, but Spick's voice grew softer. Mendeecees was reminded by her that nobody was ever truly protected by keeping the truth hidden for very long. And ultimately, the truth was revealed. Mendes rubbed his hands together and leaned back, perhaps attempting to muster the fortitude to face the flames. He acknowledged that bearing the burden of expectations had worn him out, and his tone broke with a mixture of irritation and tiredness. Being the family's rock and the one with all the answers wasn't always easy, and there were moments when he wasn't sure how much more he could take. The gathering fell silent in awe at this candor. For a brief period, the typical back and forth and arguing gave way to the unvarnished picture of a man exposing his soul. Slowly nodding, Scrappy acknowledged the suffering in the voice of his pal. Spice, however, was not yet content. She desired clarification, a declaration, or something that would either affirm that the marriage was in doubt, or demonstrate that the reports were untrue. Naturally, Harley was compelled to exert more effort. Leaning forward, she spoke loudly while grinning wickedly, enough to be heard by all. I believe Yandy has already made up her mind. She may just haven't told you yet. The phrases fell like a bomb, leaving everyone speechless and incredulous. It was a vicious charge, the type no one ever thought would be spoken out. Carly, however, delivered it effortlessly. The voices overlapping, the room exploded in commotion as some sought to defend Yandy while others added to the argument that perhaps the power couple wasn't as stable as they wanted the public to think. Mendeecees remained still, his face a mask of mixed feelings, torn between sadness and rage. The mood was twisted into something else by the lingering rumors of treachery, much heavier than anyone could have imagined. The questions continued to mount as the night wore on. Friends urged Mendeecees to be honest, but he refused, frustrating everyone in the process. And agitated. The man at the center of it all appeared more vulnerable than ever, as what had begun as a friendly chat had now devolved into a full-fledged grilling. Everyone in the room was aware that his next words might either patch the flaws or entirely destroy the picture. The room's tension was nearly uncomfortable, as, like thunder chasing lightning, voices surged and quiet descended in quick waves. Mendeecees had never been the kind to discuss personal matters with others. A person who allows deeds to speak louder than words. However, with Scrappy leaning in, Spice pressing, and Carly throwing fire whenever she could, there was no longer any safe place for he should back off. Every movement, glance, and tiny change in his body language was captured by the cameras, and viewers at home were riveted to the screen, anticipating a reality that would not whole surface. Spice drummed the table with her fingernails. The intentional, crisp pace simply serves to increase the strain. She lowered her voice, but the intensity remained constant and continued, I'm not trying to put you on blast just to be messy. However, we have witnessed Yandy defend you, support you at difficult times, when she had to bear everything alone, when others questioned her. Thus, when you claim to be unsure, that doesn't seem like the man she battled so hard for, where you two stand. Someone who seems ready to quit up. Like a razor, those words sliced through the atmosphere. With his arms folded and his gaze narrowed, Scrappy leaned back, perhaps gauging every word Mendeecees could venture to utter. Real talk, said Scrappy. You can't simply skirt the question. Everyone in this room has relationships. We're either in or out, but everyone here understands how difficult it can be. If you say it's love, there is no middle ground. If you call it love, it's the middle ground. Mendy laughed with frustration. He shook his head and said, one without humor. That's the problem, you see. You all just see fragments of what's happening, yet everyone believes they understand it. Yandy, as well as we've experienced things you can't possibly fathom, me included. All of it cannot be explained in a few words at a table. Carly grinned. It's complicated. Exaggeratedly slowing down her drink consumption, then putting it down in time to hit again. Intricate? She said it again in a sarcastic tone. Men do that. Say once they've taken one step outside. You sit here pretending you don't even know whether you saw it or not, while Yandy appears to be keeping it together. Complicated sounds like other. Complicated sounds like code for broken. Spice snapped her head in Carly's direction after the remark. You sloppy. You are aware of that. But Spice retaliated. She was secretly relieved that the question had been asked, as seen by the sparkle in her eyes. Inquired. However, Messi is obviously not providing us with the true answer, so perhaps he is what we need at this moment. This incident gave the internet fans a field day. Like wildfire, their responses are flooding in. While some criticized Carly for being insensitive, Others laughed at her audacity and referred to her as the Queen of Instigations. Within minutes, hashtags pertaining to the couple's reported breakup went viral, demonstrating how eager people were to witness rifts in a marriage they had formerly taken for granted. However, within the room, the laughing from admirers was non-existent. There were layers of mistrust and intrigue in the air. Leaning forward once again, Scrappy's voice became more solemn. "You see, I've known you for a while. I haven't witnessed you stumbling like this before, so let's be honest, buddy. Are you and his Yandy really the group we all believed you to be? Or is it now only a front?" Mendeecees' stance finally showed the weight of the inquiry as his shoulders drooped a little. After a lengthy silence, he spoke, his voice now hushed, almost exhausted. "Andy, you are loved. There's no doubting that. However, love does not imply perfection. Love isn't always enough to mend the rifts. We have history, we have children, we acquired recollections, and it adds to the difficulty. However, I am unable to sit here at this moment and tell you where we should be." Once more, the room became quiet. "The confession is being processed by everybody." Spick's face grew softer. However, the fire within her words didn't. You see, many are afraid to acknowledge that. It's possible to love someone and yet be enamored with them. However, the problem is that Yandy has never lost interest in you. Even when everything seemed to go against her, she remained strong. Therefore, what would it take for you to stand tall for her? He tried not to show it, but the directness of Spick's challenge shook him. "That's facts," Scrappy said, nodding in accord. Although the remarks hurt, they also revealed a reality that followers had. If she had been carrying it, why is she still carrying it alone? Discussed in whispers for months, Mendeecees' quiet and Yandy's strength were frequently compared on social media, with many people claiming that their relationship's imbalance had been apparent for a while. Others defended him by claiming that everyone had a breaking point and that no one knew the complete story. When it appeared that the occasion couldn't get much better, Carly leaned in with another blast, heavier. "Perhaps it has nothing to do with family, history, or love. Perhaps it has to do with trust. Perhaps Yandy no longer has the same level of faith in you. Perhaps that's why you seem so uncertain." Around the table, there were gasps. Her remarks' daring caused heads to shake and mouths to open. Mendeecees' expression stiffened, and he narrowed his eyes at Carly with such intensity that it was obvious she had touched a nerve. He said, "You don't know what you're talking about," with a sharper edge than before. "Stop sitting here and pretending to be familiar with my family." Carly wasn't finished, though. "I don't have to know your household." "I can see," she remarked, raising her eyebrows while seeming to be innocent. "It's in your eyes." The altercation intensified. Overlapping voices as Scrappy sought to calm things down and Spice tried to refocus the topic. But the harm was already done. Doubt had been sown, and viewers repeatedly relived the scene, analyzing each look, each pause, and each change in tone. Spice shook her head and sat back in her chair as the ruckus began to calm down. "Look, this is all I'm saying at the end of the day. People are free to express themselves, but if you don't make things plain, the street will tell its own tale. And you have no control once the streets begin to speak." Mendeecees evidently stroked his temples. Worn out. However, he was unable to ignore the veracity of her statement. Once rumors were going, he knew better than anybody. Managing this story became almost not possible. Still, his silence served as a shield, and the pressure of expectation was beginning to erode that wall. As the evening went on, however, though the topic was never entirely settled, the questions continued to swirl. As the cameras focused on Mendeecees' distressed state, the tension never entirely subsided. Expression. Unquestionably, there was a sense as the scenario came to a conclusion that something more significant was developing, something that may ultimately push the truth out into the light. The following day, the murmurs would not fade. The group of pals had already heard about the altercation, and by dawn, followers on all platforms were analyzing every moment of what happened. While some sped down the video to highlight Mendeecees' twitchy hands beneath the table, others concentrated on Spice's intense gaze, which appeared to cut through all justifications. The sentence that marked the occasion was, "So, are you together or not?" which went viral online and was repeatedly snipped and played back. Mendeecees. But when they woke up, the storm was still going strong. His phone was constantly buzzing with messages from old acquaintances, family members, and even calls from strangers. Reached out years ago. It was the same thing that everyone wanted to know. What was actually going on between Yandy and him? He sat silently in his living room, his face grim and inscrutable as he scrolled through the never-ending stream of postings. In contrast, Yandy appeared to be communicating silently on her own. Her quotes like strength, loyalty, and preserving one's peace abound in social media stories. Fans made the connection right away, assuming that these mysterious posts were directed at the circumstance. Sometimes silence is the loudest answer, in particular, was a remark that shocked some online. Supporters argued on whether she either making fun of Mendes or just shielding herself from the mayhem. Still energized from the previous evening, Spice and Scrappy reconnected with the gang. Spice recalled, shaking her head, how Mendeecees' face looked. She informed Scrappy he wasn't just uncomfortable, in a forceful voice. He had something to conceal. I could tell there was something more serious going on because of the way he kept avoiding us and his inability to look us in the eye. You simply don't want to say it. At first, Scrappy wasn't persuaded. Perhaps he was simply fed up with everyone in his company, he said, but even he couldn't refute the weight of his friend's remarks the previous evening. However, Scrappy acknowledged that he hadn't ever looked so lost before. He's usually solid no matter what. He appeared to be unsure of his identity last night. Carly was doing well in the drama. She summoned a few pals, adding her own flavor to the narrative and saturating every detail. Girl, he couldn't even say yes or no. She laughed into the phone, and I thought Chili was going to melt there at the moment when Spice came at him. Seat. Mendeecees' quiet only strengthened the story's tension, and her laughter only served to fuel it further, ensuring that by afternoon, everyone associated with the cast had heard about the altercation. Curiosity. He remained silent, nearly daring the rumors to consume him, rather than making a statement or defending himself online. However, that silence allowed others to fill in the gaps, and soon fanciful tales started to circulate, with some claiming that he and Yandy were living apart. Some said that he had been seen with another lady, and some even implied that the pair had split up months prior and were just keeping it quiet. Yandy sat with her inner circle amid all of this mayhem, her face composed but her heart obviously heavy. For the cameras, are you going to address what everybody's saying? Friend said bluntly. Yandy gently shook her head, saying, people will always speak, but I cannot allow their opinions to dictate my truth. I'll talk when the moment is appropriate. Let them ponder till then. Her eyes revealed the tempest that was building under the surface, yet her words were strong. Surface. When Spice made the decision to speak with Yandy directly, the tension erupted. Spice wasted no time in meeting her later that week. Even while you are aware of my affection for you, I can't help but question, where are you all truly at? Mendeecees is performing because as if we had no idea. With her hands neatly crossed in her lap, Yi inhaled deeply and remarked, we've been through more than anyone could imagine. Thoughtfully, I will say something, but I don't have to tell the world every detail. It's not easy being married. Additionally, when every imperfection is accentuated because you live in the limelight. We're working through the situation, but it's not easy. Refusing to let the debate finish so easily, Spice leaned in. However, he isn't figuring things out when he can't even tell whether you are all together. That means that everyone is free to make their own decision. Yandy's her face tensed, and she lost her composure for the first time. Do you think I'm unaware of that? Do you believe the whispers are not audible to me? Look at the remarks. I hear everything. However, there are instances when remaining silent until you're prepared to battle again is the only option to preserve what's left. There was silence in the room. Spice was looking at her with a mixture of pity and annoyance. She wanted to exert more effort, but Yandy's voice's fragility held her back from exerting excessive pressure. But the harm was already done. Even the best defense could not fully hide the story's flaws, which were already evident. Every little detail